coming up on BG24 Sports. Football had their spring game this weekend. We'll talk about that one.
And Matt Johnson was named the starting quarterback. Was it the right decision for the Falcons?
Plus, Boston saw a thriller final game for the NCAA Hockey Championship with Boston and Providence. We'll go over how the Friars were able to shock BU. All this and more coming up right here on BG24 Sports.
Falcon believable coverage that you won't get anywhere else. This is BG24 Sports.
Welcome to BG24 Sports. I'm Katie Wernke.
And I'm Terry Lash. And this Saturday, the spring game was in full swing. And Katie, look at some of these stats from this important game that start off BG's 2015 football campaign.
Absolutely. Matt Johnson had 5 touchdowns, 4 passing, 1 rushing. We saw James Kanapke with 2. But we saw a lot from other players that we've seen last year. Garrick Dieter, Ronnie Moore, and then someone new, Patrick Hannon, who had 2 touchdowns.
And Patrick Hannon, a freshman, looking forward to his contributions to this team this season. But the biggest name on that list for me is Garrick Dieter. We want to see what that wide receiver, kind of disappointing last year. The SMU transfer last year was supposed to be his big breakout year. Didn't really see a lot of that. Had some injury concerns. I'm expecting a lot out of Garrick Dieter with Matt Johnson back on top of the helm.
Absolutely. 2 touchdowns for Garrick Dieter. Ronnie Moore, we saw him a lot last year with James Kanapke as a quarterback. Ronnie Moore had 2 receiving touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns, but Patrick Hannon had 2 rushing touchdowns. The Falcons are looking good on offense this year. They didn't lose a lot of people last year.
Now, the playmakers are still intact. That's the most impressive part about this Falcon team. You know they're going to put points on the board with this Falcon fast offense. It should be very exciting football.
Absolutely. Now, if we look at some of the defensive stats, this is where the Falcons were hurt a little bit last year with the seniors, and Gabe Martin leaving, Brian Sutton, Jude I.J. Barima, but not bad stats. Shannon Smith had 3 sacks. Clint Stevens with 6 tackles. That's one big key player for the Falcons right there.
You're absolutely right. Also add to that list, we had Charlie Walker that's also leaving. So there is a lot to replace for this defensive group for the Falcons. But you mentioned, look at some of those terrific players we saw a little bit last season. They're going to have much bigger roles this year. Austin Valdez and Nate Locke are going to be 2 huge linebackers for the club this year. And then you got Clint Stevens. Him and Nick Johnson tied for first with interceptions in the entire country last year from freshman. So he'll be a true sophomore this year. Really excited to see how he does.
Absolutely, and Austin Valdez had 6 tackles as well. Malik Brown with 2 sacks. So we saw a lot from the defense, a lot from the offense. But what should we expect this year from the Falcons?
I think we're going to see a team that's a lot more disciplined than last year. Yes, it is a new defensive coordinator, a new scheme, but it seems like they're more in sync already at this point this year than they were last year. We saw right away to start the season how the defense just didn't seem to be in the swing of things to start the year. I expect a much more sturdy group this year.
Absolutely. You said we're going to start to see them really disciplined, like you had just said with when Roger Lewis, he was a freshman last year. There were a lot of younger guys last year that now have that experience on how to play collegiate football, and they're going to be coming into their own, and they're going to be ready to go for next year.
I'm really looking forward to the secondary. We already talked about Nick Johnson and Clint Stevens. They're just absolute ball hawks last year. I want to see how Brian Sutton is replaced back there at safety, one of the best players in BG for a long time now. Let's see how they can replace number 3.
Absolutely. It'll also be interesting to see how they replace Gabe Martin.
True.
Another huge defensive player for the Falcons. But I guess that'll come a little later this year.
A lot of question marks, but a lot of excitement.
Absolutely. But one question mark that we do not have anymore is who is the starting quarterback for Bowling Green. Dino Babers announced that it was Matt Johnson last week. When we come back, we'll talk about this decision and if it was the right move for the Falcons. Head football coach Dino Babers announced last week that Matt Johnson was going to be the #1 starting quarterback for the Falcons, putting James Kanapke in that #2 spot and then Cody Callaway behind him. But let's hear what Matt Johnson had to say about being named the starter.
You know, I said this before. You know, me and James both had the mindset that we were going to be the starter. So, you know, when you hear that you're the starter, you feel overjoyed, but also at the same time, it's what I expected. It's what I wanted to hear. So, you know, now I just know that it's another step, and I know that the guys are looking to me again to be the leader of the offense, and it's something that I need to do, to a high level.
Now, Terry, this not quite exactly the Ohio State caliber of talk between football and quarterbacks. Not quite there yet, but Still a big decision for Dino Babers, and he decided to go with Matt Johnson after Johnson sat out almost all of last year except for Game 1 with that hip injury. Do you think this was the right decision for the Falcons?
Great decision by Coach Dino Babers. You have to go with Matty J. We forget about what happened 2 years ago. He led this team to a MAC championship against a team that was supposed to be in the Orange Bowl in Northern Illinois, and it just didn't seem to have that same spark to the offense that we had last year when James Kanacki was behind the center.
Absolutely. If we take a look at some of the stats, James Kanacki versus Matt Johnson. Now this is Kanacki's stats from 2014 and Matt Johnson, the last time we'd seen him in 2013. Matt Johnson, clearly he does have the better stats. Maybe, James Kanacki has the more completions, not as many total yards, but I think the thing that stands out the most is the touchdown to interception ratio. Matt Johnson, 25 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, where James Kanacki had 15 touchdowns but 12 interceptions.
And the most important stat to me, Katie, is not something that we can see on a full screen. It's the fact that James Kanacki had Dino Babers' offense and put up those numbers. If Matt Johnson was put in that offense last year, instead of missing every game after Western Kentucky, who knows what kind of stats he could have put up. It is an offense perfectly tailored for him. He's a gunslinger. He has mobility. He's going to fit right in. I think he's the guy going forward, and Coach Babers knew that, and it's been his guy all along.
Absolutely. I mean, even looking at the spring game, Matt Johnson, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. He was 17 for 23 for 182 yards. So he really did get a hold of that offense, and he ran with it.
And it feels good. It feels good to finally have Matt Johnson back playing at the caliber he was playing. I know it's just a spring game, but we've seen him on the side all year in sweatpants. To see him in shoulder pads is a nice, refreshing change. One thing we should mention, Clay Nichols, who was fighting with James Kanacki for that backup quarterback spot, no longer a Bowling Green Falcon. The Texas Tech transfer has now transferred again, hasn't named what team he's going to go to yet, but it will no longer be a Falcon.
Absolutely. So that puts James Kanacki in the second position, which, as we saw last year, he might have to play again. We're not, with the hip injury with Matt Johnson, he's getting better this year. But if we take a look at James Kanacki last year, if we talk about that for a little bit, he did good, but the biggest problem that James Kanacki had is that he could not compete in some of the really important games. We saw the Northern Illinois MAC championship game against Toledo, Western Michigan. All of those were losses. He did come out against South Alabama in the Camellia Bowl, but still in high-pressure situations, James Kanacki could not always get it done.
You're right. The one game that sticks out to me is the Indiana game where he did fantastic, but it was kind of a downward spiral after that point, and we just didn't see that same sort of flair we saw from him to start the year. And those turnovers we talked about earlier, those 12 interceptions doesn't seem like a large number, but those came at some really inopportune times that really hurt the Falcons.
It absolutely did. That MAC championship game, he only had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
No touchdowns, no interceptions against Toledo, and we had seen Cody Callaway come in, a freshman quarterback come in, because James Kanacki could not always get the job done. But let's take a listen to what Dino Babers had to say about making his decision on the quarterback.
All the quarterbacks did extremely well with the ones. The ones are good, but it was amazing to watch Matt work with the 2s and the 3s and how much production and productivity he had with guys that weren't as good as the 1s. And when you started looking at the productivity of Matt with the 2s and 3s compared to the other guys, it was pretty clear who was making the rest of the guys play better.
Dino talked about how Matt Johnson was exceptional with the 1s and the 2s for the team, but Matt Johnson, he does still have that hip that we have to worry about. Do you think health will be a problem?
I do not, because I don't think Matt Johnson would be put in a position to play in the spring game unless Dino Babers was 100% confident that he was ready to play. He wouldn't risk him in such a meaningless game. That's why we saw some of the other stars like Roger Lewis not out there, because there's no need for it. I think Matt Johnson is 100% ready for the season, and I'm really excited for it.
I'm very excited too. I think it's going to be good to have Matt Johnson back in the starting position. It's also going to be good to have James Kanacki as that second spot quarterback, though, just in case something were to happen, because James Kanacki has an entire season under his belt. He does have that experience now, so it's not a bad situation for the Falcons to be in, having 2 quarterbacks that know what the pressure feels like and know how to play collegiate football.
You're absolutely right, Kate. The backup quarterback is always the most underrated position in football, regardless of level. So it's great to have that experience.
Absolutely. But now after the break, we're going to switch gears and talk about NCAA hockey. The Frozen Four took place in Boston with the championship game being against Boston and Providence. Stay with us.
And the NCAA Hockey National Championship was this weekend. Boston and Providence hit the ice. It was the Friars' chance for their first ever championship. Boston was looking for their 6th ever championship.
Absolutely. It was Boston's 11th appearance in the championship game, and they fell short. If you look at the stats, Providence had 4 goals compared to Boston's 3, a really close game. But one thing that stands out is Boston's shots. They had 52 shots on goal, but only 3 goals with those shots.
Absolutely right. They were getting shots on the net all game long, but they just couldn't deliver, only 3 times. Great goaltending. We'll hit more on that later. Not much penalties either. You see a clear difference, 3-1. But that is not much for a game of this caliber. It was a very clean game. It just seemed like Providence just a little bit, with a little bit of an edge on the Terriers in this one, and they got a little bit of luck to get the victory. They
absolutely did. And you mentioned the penalties. Boston had 3 penalties. Providence with only 1 penalty. That is drastic in such a big game when it really limits the amount of power plays that teams have on a chance to score.
Yeah, you just have to give it up to the Providence defense to face up many shots, making it hard to get good shots on the net. There's a difference in having shots on the net and having clear shots and getting goals, and I think Providence did a great job of limiting those opportunities.
Absolutely. If we take a look at Providence period by period, in the first period, they only had 6 shots on goal. That is not a lot. It increased extensively throughout the game, but 6 shots on goal in the first period, and they had 1 goal in the first period as well.
Yeah, that's a great percentage, 1 goal on 6 shots, but that is more of what we expect to see from a Friar team that dominated all postseason along with those 17 shots in the second and 20 in the third. They just progressively got better throughout the game. They gained a lot of momentum on the ice, and they came away with a victory because of that. They just kept playing better and better when the Terriers just kind of stayed pat.
They absolutely did. And when we talk about the penalties as well and the amount of power plays, Providence had 3 chances to score on power play. They did end up getting 1 power play goal. That makes a big difference in this game. Three power plays may not seem like that much, but when you have an opportunity to score like that, you have to take hold of it.
Yeah, 33% is a great power play percentage, and they took advantage. It wasn't a lot of chances, but when they got that power play, they made the most of it. Only 1 for the Terriers. They couldn't make the most of it, so that's a big deal.
Absolutely. Now, one of the biggest talks about this game is Matt O'Connor, Boston's goalie. He had an outstanding game, but he did flounder a little bit in that third period where he knocked one of the goals in.
Absolutely. It was the telltale goal of the game. It tied it up at 3. O'Connor had the puck in his glove, just dropped it, and let it go in the back of the net. It was a SportsCenter not top 10 worthy play for months and months on end. I think we'll receive that, and just a crushing way for O'Connor to end his season.
Absolutely, especially coming into this game. He had a .928 save percentage, only allowed just over 2 goals per game. And for him to score 1 of his own goals has to be just absolutely devastating.
You're right. He's going to go away from this game looking like the GOAT, but he has been great all year long, and we're going to forget about that, but we see all that. 43 shots faced, 39 saves. Fantastic job. That's a lot of pucks coming at you, and he did a good job of fending him away. It was just that brief lapse of concentration for a split second, and it changed the whole outcome of the game.
It absolutely did. He still has an outstanding record, though, 26-4-4.
Yeah.
So a good goalie, but just not the right day for Matt O'Connor.
And it ends in a Providence championship.
It absolutely does. Their first ever championship. Now, when we come back, it is Hot or Not. We have topics ranging from Bowling Green baseball to the Masters. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time for a little game called Hot or Not. Terry and I have a topic, and we give you our picks on whether they are
hot
or not. This week we have topics ranging from the NBA to the Masters and everywhere in between, but we are going to start out with some BG baseball. The Bowling Green took down the Bobcats this weekend in a series, split, 2-1 in the series, and Brandon Howard was a key player in that series. So Terry, hot or not?
Not hot, Katie. And I know Brandon Howard had a good series. 4 for 8 on the weekend, batted .500. But overall this year, he just hasn't been that great. And we're talking about a Bobcat team that's one of the worst baseball teams in the entire MAC. So it's not really saying much. Not hot yet for Brandon Howard.
You know what? I'm going to go with hot. In this series against Ohio, he pushed his ERA up to, or not ERA, his batting average up to over 300. I'm getting all sorts of things mixed up here, Terry. Too much baseball going on. He had 2 RBIs on Sunday. So that Sunday game against Ohio, the key game for this series, it was the rubber match, and Brandon Howard was able to really come out, and he got two RBIs. His average is over 300 now. You got to go with hot on Brandon Howard.
All right.
All right, well, now we're moving over to some other baseball. I won't get mixed up this time. A-Rod, hot or not?
I'm going to go hot for A-Rod. I have to admit I was completely wrong on him. I thought his career was over, but now batting .300, he's been 6 for 20. He had that home run the air, his 660th of his career. It looks like A-Rod's back to old A-Rod form. I'm
going to have to agree with you, Terry. He's hot. I thought the same thing, that his career was over after last year only playing 44 games. But then now, this last game against Boston, the Red Sox, the big rivalry game, he had 4 RBIs, only 1 strikeout. He was 1 for 2, and he had a double. So A-Rod, I think he is back, and if he keeps it up, he's on track to even beat Willie Mays, maybe even Babe Ruth in home runs.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, now moving it over to the NBA, Russell Westbrook, hot or not?
Not. And I know that sounds absolutely insane. He leads the league in points. He's averaging triple-doubles practically. But he's not getting the most important stat, W's. And that is what's going to lead the Thunder to not get into the playoffs. He's just not leading this team in the way of victories that he needs to be.
But Terry, I'm going to disagree with you again. He is hot. Russell Westbrook is definitely hot. While you say he's not really leading the team to these wins, who else are you going to count on to lead this team into the wins? The Thunder have a lot of injuries, and Russell Westbrook has stepped up. Like you said, he leads the league in scoring. He just got a career-best 54 points against the Pacers. He's leading the team. He is leading the team. While they may not be getting the wins, you can't count on one guy to lead the team for every game.
Leading them to failure, agreed.
Wow. Terry, you're a little hostile here. All right, now moving over to the Masters, we have Tiger Woods, who tied 17th this weekend.
I'm going to say Tiger is hot. I think we saw the Tiger of old a little bit. No, he wasn't in the top 5 when it came from the end, but he was there all tournament long. And when you have that name of Tiger Woods just kind of stalking the leaderboards, you always have that presence, and I think Tiger's back.
Once again, Terry, disagreeing with you. Tiger Woods is not hot. He has not won a Masters since 2005, 10 years ago. He has not won a PGA Championship since 2007. In the last 2 tournaments leading up to the Masters, he was cut. He didn't even make it to the final rounds. While he was up there, he was tied for 5th going into Sunday.
Yes. Still
tied for 17th, shot 5 under par. When you look at other guys like Jordan Spieth, who shot 18 under par, Phil Mickelson, who shot 14 under par, Tiger Woods is definitely not hot. 10 Americans finished above him in the tournament. Not hot for Tiger Woods. But that is all for the hot or not this week. When we come back, we have our picks of the week for the Bowling Green game. Stay with us. Welcome back. We have 4 games this week to give you our picks of the week. Baseball, softball, tennis, and women's soccer. All Bowling Green sports this time.
Yeah.
And what makes our picks better than putting a little friendly competition into it? We have my picks, Terry's picks, and Studio Crew's picks for each game. After each week, we keep track of our records, and right now, I am right in the middle with a record of 12-12. Terry's in the lead at 15-9, and Studio Crew still pulling up the rear with 10-14. So let's get our picks started this week with Bowling Green baseball. They take on Eastern Michigan. I have to go with the Falcons. I think they came out against Ohio, won that series. They did play Eastern Michigan earlier this season and lost, but they're home now. I think that home game and the win against Ohio is going to propel them to the win against Eastern. I'm
going with the Eagles. We saw it last week when they went up to Ypsilanti and lost to Eastern Michigan. I picked the Falcons in that game. Not making that mistake again. Going with the Eagles in the Battle of the Birds.
All right, and Studio Crew is also going to be on my side. They are taking Bowling Green. But now moving over to some softball, they take on Notre Dame. I'm going to go with Notre Dame on this one. I think softball They've been back and forth all year. I think Notre Dame is a very strong team, and they're going to overtake the Falcons.
I think you're right. You got to go with the Fighting Irish. The Falcons struggling this weekend. I don't like their chances of going into this midweek game against the Irish.
No, definitely not. Bowling Green is the pick for the studio crew, so they're going to go against the Tide there, pick the Falcons. But now women's soccer, the spring season against Dayton. Who are you going to pick on that one? I have definitely going with Dayton. I think women's soccer only had a few wins last year. Not sure if they're ready to really to come out super strong this year so far, so I have to go with the Flyers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Flyers too, Katie. The team made a lot of strides from the year before to last year, but still don't think they're quite there yet. Got to go with Dayton.
Absolutely. And now women's tennis. They take on Ball State this weekend. I definitely am going with Ball State. Women's tennis is winless so far this year. I don't think that they're going to see their first win against the Cardinals.
I don't either. I would love to pick the Falcons in this one. The second Battle of the Birds we have, this one also going to the away team. Going with Ball State, the Falcons, there's just not the year tennis-wise. They've lost a lot of players to injuries. There are a lot of young players on this team, and maybe next year we'll see a better effort from the Falcons, but just not their year this year.
No, it's definitely not. You mentioned all of the injuries. They also, like you said, the young team, they lost Nikki Chiricasa.
Yes, absolutely.
They're one of their most successful players in the program's history. They also lost their head coach, so they're under new leadership, young team. I don't think that it is their year this year. Studio crew is also going with Ball State, so we'll see. We'll see if I can maybe edge you a little bit this week on the picks, Terry.
We'll see, Katie.
But that is all for BG24 Sports tonight. Check us out on YouTube for more videos.
And follow us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Terry Lash.
And I'm Katie Warnke. Have a great night.